You know, there was a lot of talk in recent history about giving some sort of pandemic amnesty, and the basic principle behind this was a lot of us were scared, a lot of us were freaked out, and some of us, particularly people on the left side, did things that we regret in the hysteria, and what we need to do to move forward as a society is give a little bit of amnesty, give a little bit of a pass to those who messed up, because going forward, we have to move forward, and what we need to do is just move forward. Now, a lot of people rejected this outright, and if I'm being perfectly honest, I was not one of those people. I actually sat down, thought about it for a little while, and then I said to myself, you know what? If you're somebody I knew personally, if you're somebody in my friends or family group, if you're somebody who is genuinely concerned and kept yourself abreast of the situation, and you came up with a more restrictive mindset than the general population, or than people from my political persuasion, to be more accurate, because the general population was quite panicked during the course of the virus, you know what? I say fine. I'm gonna let that pass. I'm gonna let that go. If you were somebody that insisted on people wearing masks in order to be in close quarters inside 2.5 years ago, then I'm not gonna make that a thing. But if you're someone who went beyond the initial scare, if you're someone who went beyond the original 15 days, hell, I'll even grant you 30 days to flatten the curve, and you were pushing out propaganda, and then you jumped on things like the George Floyd riots because all of a sudden the science changed and the virus knew what a racial reckoning was, and thus backed off, you're not getting any forgiveness. If you're government officials who thought it was your opportunity to deem who is worthy to participate and not lose their livelihood versus who is essential, then no, you're not going to be forgiven. And the thing that you need to understand is that this isn't a position that I arrived at casually. This isn't a position that I just came to without any form or reason. The reality is that these people who put in those restrictions haven't forgiven you for defying them. They're still looking for ways at the federal government to maintain the ability to force masks on you on airplanes, even though we know from the science, from the studies, that airplane transmission doesn't appear to be a thing. Every restriction that was fought back actually is being challenged by the government just so they can maintain that power, just so they can do it to you all over again. So, we're not really going to go into a thing where we give amnesty to the people who are authoritarian to us when what they're looking for is revenge for not letting them clamp down more. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about a story out of Virginia where a 2 years violation of the COVID restrictions was just enforced through a raid, and we need to discuss the implications of it. However, this video is in fact sponsored, so I'm going to chuck it to the sponsor. One-handed chuck. Did you see the power in that chuck? Then I'll bring it back over here and we'll discuss it on the other side. Thick skin is good for more than just fighting off mean words. In fact, thick skin can actually help prevent you from showing the visible signs of aging, because when your skin gets thin, it starts to lose elasticity. You start to get wrinkles. You start looking quite old in the face, and you might think there's absolutely nothing you can do about it, but luckily for you, today's video sponsor can help you. If you go over to healthwithjustice.com, you can get this amazing multi-collagen powder with 5 different types of collagens that can help thicken your skin, maintain the elasticity, and fight off aging. That's healthwithjustice.com, healthwithjustice.com. Matt Strickland and Gore Meltz is the subject of today's video for you who are unaware of this situation. He is a guy who, during the course of the restrictions imposed by the state of Virginia, actually stepped up and fought back for his business, and he has a great American story. First and foremost, he joined the United States Armed Forces when he was 17 years old. And this wasn't somebody who signed up for the United States Armed Forces and spent his time in the United States of America playing cards with his buddies on base. Not that that isn't honorable to serve in the military. This is somebody who actually went overseas multiple times for multiple tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan. And when he came home after serving his country ever since he was 17 years old, he thought he would take his shot at the American dream. So in 2016, he opened his first food truck, and slowly but surely, his business became successful. His dedication and discipline that he likely learned in the United States Armed Forces paid off, and he had a second food truck. And then after that, he ended up with a brick and mortar location in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and by all accounts, the customers seemed to love this location. But then, everything changed when the Fire Nation came.
Everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
No, wait, wrong story, and Matt Strickland is the wrong bald guy. But then everything changed when the lockdowns came in, and we saw restriction after restriction targeting what they deemed to be non-essential businesses. Now, for a while, Strickland looked at what was going on. He looked at the virus, he looked at the panic, and decided that he was going to comply with the restrictions for a brief period of time. However, once he actually found out that the restrictions didn't appear to actually be rooted in science, he decided that he was going to defy them, open up his business, and serve his customers, because he spent his whole entire life building this. He served our country, and there's no way it made sense to him to give up his livelihood based on the false promises and the non-scientifically based restrictions that were being imposed upon him and his fellow small business owners. He wasn't somebody that was just going to take being deemed non-essential laying down, so he stood up for himself. And over a year ago, he actually made news for doing this, and there were some big instances, and this all culminated in him actually deciding that he was going to run for a state representative position, to which he is currently a candidate for that position. Now, why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about the restrictions? Why are we talking about all this nonsense right now in this very moment? Well, the reason why this story has come up again is because even though he fought back against these restrictions, and a lot of these restrictions are just not in place, he was just raided based on his violation of those old restrictions, because when the Virginia government didn't like what he was doing, one of the tricks that they used to try to enforce their unconstitutional mandates was to target his liquor license. So now he's considered somebody who's a criminal for violating the law of selling his liquor without a license, which he had, and the only reason it was revoked was due to the fact that the government decided to revoke it as a consequence for him standing up for his constitutional liberty. And there's actually footage of this incident that was posted by Matt Strickland on his channel, and I'm going to show it to you. However, I do want to give the caveat that the original footage had audio out of sync. However, I'm not a hack fraud like a bunch of people on YouTube, and I'm capable of resyncing the audio, so I'm going to do that as best I can, so you can actually see the video in higher quality than almost anyone else is producing, because I'm actually going to make some edits so you can understand that, because I care about your viewing experience.
What's going on, man?
So we've talked to Maria, got a search warrant for the alcohol.
Search warrant for what?
Alcohol-based transactions.
Now look, I'm pretty much a law and order guy. I've made it clear throughout the videos that I've made on this channel, and it's one thing to say that this guy violated the law, therefore we send in the police in order to deal with it. And I've seen a lot of people complain, including Matt Strickland himself, about the number of officers that were needed for this incident. However, what people have not been talking about is the fact that this man is clearly Bruce Banner, thus meaning that they sent in an Avenger to deal with it, and I'm sorry, a liquor license fine is not an Avengers level event. What are you doing sending Mark Ruffalo in there? He also looks really young, really spry. Maybe this ties into the collagen powder, healthwithjustice.com, throwing in an extra sponsorship reference. But regardless, that is not a tie-in I am in support of, because again, this is very menacing. Iron Man's gonna show up next, maybe Thor. Ridiculous. Now look, I love the fact that Strickland is confronting the people who are trying to disrupt his business. I love the fact that he's confronting the people who seize some of his property because they want him to not only pay his fines of around $4,000, but they want him to pay the city back based on the fact that they had to send officers to harass him during the course of the investigation. I love everything about this energy that he's bringing, and for those of you who are under the impression that maybe the cops didn't know the particulars of the situation and they just showed up because they got reports about how this guy was serving liquor without a license, I say that is thinly possible, but overall, this is a guy who's running for state senate on these issues. This is a guy who became a local celebrity and a national celebrity to a certain extent, and it appears that they're doing this raid on behalf of a bureau that specifically handles the liquor permits, liquor licenses, and all things alcohol in the state of Virginia or in this local municipality. I actually forgot if they were a state agency or a local agency. Regardless, that's not the point. It seems like they would know the particulars of this situation, and they're just acting on orders blindly, even though this guy has won and adjudicated his rights multiple different times in a court of law. What this is punishment because he dared dared defy the restrictions. And honestly, if I'm going by what YouTube's terms of service says, I would say they're 100% right to do so. All bow down to Lord Anthony Fauci. Hallowed be his name. He's an absolute saint. Please disregard the fact that I said I was 100% on his side, because Lord Fauci knows all, and even the restrictions that were scientifically proven to not make sense still make sense because Lord Fauci endorsed them. But all joking aside, all kidding aside, I am proud of him for standing up for himself, and I'm proud of Glenn Youngkin, the Republican governor who was put in place later after these restrictions, for saying in response to this, no, you need to stop enforcing these restrictions. We are over it at this point, and we're not going to hold people accountable for things that Governor Northam instilled without constitutional backing. So I do give credit to Youngkin for answering this, but the idea that this could go on, this revenge raid 2 years later, is absurd. And the idea that Strickland should have to pay $10,000 to get a permit that should have never been revoked from him is also absurd. This is not the way that we should be treating our veterans. This is not the way that we should be treating our citizens. This is not the way that we should be treating our small business owners, especially when time and time again he was proven right. And more importantly, when we're talking about a family-owned business, he should have the right to risk his own life, even if you believe the virus was super scary and deadly for him, in order to protect his livelihood. This is somebody that understands that fundamentally the product of your life and your liberty is your justly acquired property, and depriving him of that is depriving him of a huge portion of what his life is about. So yeah, I am on this guy's side. I think the raid is absolutely absurd, and Strickland, again, it's like they did this to boost his campaign, is probably going to win that state Senate seat, and if he doesn't, I will think that I'm pretty ashamed of the state of Virginia, and specifically in that district. If this isn't a guy that you can get behind, somebody who actually stands up for what he believes in, somebody who stood up for this country, served this country, and has been getting a raw deal by the country, but still pledges fidelity to our Constitution, I don't know what you're about, but this is what I'm about, and this is what I'm supporting.
You guys felt the need to bring all of these police officers here just to do that this morning?
I'll also point out that the number of officers for this raid of a guy who's clearly shown himself to be nonviolent, very patient, I mean he's running for office, is also absurd, and Strickland has a ridiculously strong voice that everybody should take note of.
What the state of Virginia just did is they took my livelihood away from me right before Christmas.
I almost forgot that this happened right before Christmas. So Merry Christmas, American citizens. Merry Christmas, citizens of Virginia. The COVID police, the COVIDians, are still enforcing this nonsense. They're coming after you, and they don't care about the holiday seasons because you were naughty, you didn't obey the restrictions, you didn't obey your God, Lord Fauci, so they're gonna punish you and make sure you have a very unhappy Christmas.
Ultimately, both the restaurant's health and alcohol permits would be suspended. Strickland went to court and got his health permit back, but the alcohol permit was a different story, with the Virginia ABC writing that despite a lengthy legal battle in the Circuit Court of Spotsylvania County ruling in the ABC's favor, Gourmelts continue to serve beer, wine, and mixed beverages to customers.
I knew that the only way we come out of this is by the community standing together and fighting back against this tyrannical government. So I continue to sell alcohol.
Now, to be fair, he did in fact lose his case. He took his battle to the courts turned their back on him, even though clearly and obviously they lost their liquor license due to not following unconstitutional laws, and this was a punitive measure in order to get them to comply. He did lose the court battle, so the raid is legitimate in that regard. However, I don't view the court decision as the correct decision, and I would think most of you would agree with that assessment. But again, I leave that up to you guys out there in the audience to make that determination, whether or not it makes sense or whether or not his technical violation of the law should actually be responded to by law enforcement, and he should actually be obligated to pay the fines that were assessed to him, especially since comparatively it's $4,000. Now, he also has to pay $6,000 for the investigation, which is kind of absurd to spend $6,000 to go get $4,000, but whatever, that's how government works, that's how authoritarianism works. And again, I don't want to bias you guys too much by calling it authoritarianism and telling you I disagree with it and making the argument for my side of the situation. So if you disagree with me, feel free to let me know down in the comments below. Now, if you like this video, you can show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social media. Support me via the support links in the description box of this video. This has been me talking about a raid 2 years out based on restrictions. Till next time.